Hello, and welcome to Yodacast episode 2. In this episode, we'll go through repositories, what they are, how to access them, and how you can use the default repositories to your advantage. But first, let's go over something completely unrelated to Yoda just for a few moments to kind of help you understand a little bit about the magic going behind the scenes, which in this case is a Docker container that I wrote in close conjunction with Yoda. Um, a small side note, um, the examples and tutorials that we're going over are for web applications. However, I don't want you to get the impression that Yoda is just for web apps. It's just, again, for these examples, and the things that I use it for on a daily basis are to create web applications. So, again, just keep that in mind. But so the magic going behind the scenes is a Docker container called Automagicproxy. An Automagicproxy is requires Docker, as it's a Docker container, and it also requires a DNS, a wildcard DNS entry set up for your domain name. So in the previous episode, I showed you how how.kcmerrill just poof into existence. Um, and so if you don't have a wildcard DNS entry, um, that's totally okay. I'll show you this really great website called xip.io, and it's wildcard DNS for everyone. It's a really fantastic service. I would highly encourage you to use it if you cannot get a wildcard DNS entry set up. It also works behind firewalls, routers. It's essentially just a custom DNS server. So you can read the documentation again at xip.io to get more information on that. However, for me, I've got a wildcard DNS set up on kcmerrill.com. So anything .kcmerrill.com will actually be routed to my IP address and to port 80. So the reason why that's important is because I've got Automagicproxy, which is a public repository within Yoda. And Automagicproxy is simply a reverse proxy to direct a dynamic DNS entry to your Docker containers via your Docker container names. So if I show you this here really quick, if I do a Docker PS, Automagicproxy is running on my host machine on port 80. And essentially what it does is it looks for the beginning of the header request coming in. So for example, in the previous episode, we had how.kcmerrill.com. And what it looks for is the beginning, and it tries to find a container a container name rather, that matches the entry coming in. And if it finds it, it'll automatically forward all the traffic to the appropriate port. Now, two things. Automagicproxy, by default, out of the box, will only look for private ports 80. So basically, web servers on the back end. However, that's completely customizable. There's more information on Automagicproxy if you head over to the Docker Hub and then kcmerrill Automagicproxy. I go over in great detail about what it is, but just know that Automagicproxy will every 10 seconds reload its configuration and look for new container names. So it's not instantaneous. It takes about 5 seconds or so once your container is booted and on the appropriate port for Automagicproxy to take place. And again, just to reiterate the point in the previous episode, that's why how was not available until we summoned the project how, and it started the container name called how. So let me give you a quick example of that while also segueing into repository. So keep all of that in mind just for a few moments here, and let's talk about repositories for a moment, and then we'll kind of tie the two together. So repositories, if you want to think of a repository as just a place to share your configuration files, and your Yoda configuration files are just simple YAML files that might look a lot like your Docker Compose, Docker Fig files. And those configuration files, we'll explain more of that in a future episode. But for now, let's just show you the repositories, what you have available currently out of the box. So to see what repositories you have available out of the box, you want to do a Yoda repos. Yoda repos will show you all of the repositories that you currently have access to. The ones in red denote that the repository is not up and running, and of course the ones in white say that it is up and running. The reason for that is because by default you get your own repository on your own host name, so that's your own private repository, if you will. And of course anyone who checks out and runs Yoda has the option and availability to have their own repository, and we'll get to that here in just a few moments. So to see what's available in the repository, you can use the find or the search command. So Yoda find, without any additional arguments, will simply find all of the repositories that you have access to. And if you do a Yoda find, and let's say we just did Casey Merrill, you can see here that it now limits only to Casey Merrill. And if we did a Yoda find how, we should only find our how project. So Yoda find will show you everything. Yoda find something else will limit the scope. So let's just do a Yoda find again. And by default, you get two, well, you get more than two. You get a few public repositories here. And one of the first ones that you'll see there is a static web server. So to see what that static web server configuration looks like, you'll want to do a Yoda inspect. So Yoda inspect and then dev static web server. And again, I got dev static web server from here. So I'll hit enter, and this is basically the configuration that will run if I were to summon it, pull it, or init it, and we'll get to that in just a moment here. So you can see here that this project requires Automagicproxy. It requires the image Casey Merrill base, which is in the public Docker Hub repositories, and this is actually the secret sauce here to this particular example. The name of this container is a simple check to see what the folder name is, and it will create a folder, it will create a container that's based off of the folder name. So, and I will show you that here in just a second. And the next line down here is a volume mount to get your working directory wherever it's in to var www.html inside the server. And after we lift it, it'll pump out this message saying where your where that's available at. So I'm going to show you two really quick things here. So the first one is a summon, and what summon does is it takes the name of the repository. So in this case, let's use the HAL example again. So if I did Yoda summon Casey Merrill HAL, in the current folder where you're currently at, which is where I would recommend, again, having a folder for all of your code projects, it's going to create a folder called HAL. It's going to then cd inside of HAL and then do all of the instructions that Yoda configuration file expects inside the folder HAL. If you'll notice, we'll go back here, we'll go inspect, and we'll inspect the dev static web server. And you'll notice here there's a require. What this does is this says the project Casey Merrill Automagicproxy, which you can find up here, is a requirement in order for this to get running. Required folders will basically be on the same level of where you're at right now, and it will do the exact same thing. It will go and try to lift that project or summon that project. And you can see here that there's a folder called Automagicproxy, and again that matches the project name here, which is already downloaded, summoned, and ready to go. So it'll just simply lift that for you as a dependency and then continue on its way. So So let's create a simple what is my IP application. So what we'll do here is we're going to create a project, and we're going to create a folder called what is my IP. And again, based on the static web server, the DNS name that we'll be looking for will be what is my IP. So if I go make dir what is my IP we'll see the end of that, and we'll just simply add an index.php file, and we're going to keep it really simple here. If I can type, we'll do PHP. We'll just do echo remote server remote ADDR. Oh, actually, I have to run that through a web browser, and that's okay. I will show you that here in just a second. So again, all I've done is created a folder, put an index file in there, and let's go ahead and now let's pull a static web server down. So again, to stress the differences between a summon and a pull, a summon will create a project folder for you, cd into it, and run all of the required steps. A Yoda pull will pull the configuration file in the current directory where you're currently at and run the configuration exactly how you have it set up. So in this case, we're going to do a Yoda pull, and we're going to do its dev, and it's going to be a static web server. So Automagicproxy is a dependency. My base image, KCML base, is a dependency. It's going to try to stop what is my IP address, the container. It doesn't exist because we just created it. And then it's going to go ahead and do our Docker run. So now if we do a Docker PS, we should see what is my IP. And the port that it's running on is a random port that Docker has chosen, 32811. And then, so if I were to go to my IP address 32811, I should be able to see the code that we just wrote. However, because we have what is my IP address, or what is my IP, the container name running, and because I have a DNS entry set up to what is my IP, 32811 should be the same thing as me going to whatismyip.kcml.com. And so let's go test that out. So if I open up a new tab here and go to whatismyip.kcml.com rather, I should see my IP address, which I do, which is fantastic. Alright, so again, keep in mind that if you don't have a wildcard DNS entry set up for your domain, just check out xip.io. So, alright, so that's fantastic. So I've shown you how to summon a public repository. I've also showed you how to pull down a repository. But let's say for a moment here that you're ready for your configuration file that you've run to be shared in a repository. So if I do a Yoda find here, what you'll first want to do is you'll first want to summon your own repository, and that's just simply a summon of kcmerl yoda.repo. So if I do a Yoda summon kcmerl yoda.repo, again, it requires Automagicproxy. It requires the Yoda www base container, and then it requires a special run command. So so if you for me, because I have on kcml.com the master Yoda repository, it usually takes about 5 seconds for it to come back, and sure enough, it does. So if I did a Yoda find what is my IP, nothing would show up. So so let's go ahead and talk about sharing. So my repository that I have now, after I've summoned my yoda.repo, is now yoda.kcmerl.com, which just so happens to be the main repository that I'm sharing with everyone right now. So let's go into cd what is my IP, and if we take a look at this, all we really have is this index file, and it's not anything too crazy. So what we can actually do is we can actually share this project with everyone with just a small modification rather to the configuration file that we've got. So if we go ahead and open up the Yoda file, which gets downloaded whenever you do a pull. Again, Yoda pull will pull down the configuration and store it in a .yoda file. One thing we want to do here, we can leave all this the same, but let's change a few things here. So this is our web server, and let's just go ahead and get rid of the dynamic name, and let's just simply change the name of this container to what is my IP. Let's change the description to a simple IP. Let's do a simple IP lookup tool. And let's see here. Your IP lookup tool is now running. Again, we don't need the dynamic name anymore. It's just simply what is my IP. And then the other thing we want to do here is we want to run a setup command. And basically the very first time that this runs, we're going to create a folder called, it's going to be called what is my IP, but we need a step here. What we need to do is we need to touch an index.php file. Or you know what, better yet, one thing we could do is just echo it. So we could do echo php, echo, what was it? It was server, remote IP ADDR. Oh, I think it's just remote ADDR actually. Now obviously you wouldn't ever want to code in here, but let's just say you had a repository, right? Instead of echoing out a file to index.php, what if you wanted to git clone github.com/some person some repo as the source directory? Again, you could do something like that. Again, it's completely up to the maintainer of the configuration file. If this doesn't make sense what we're doing right now, just bear with me. Hold off until say episode 3 or 4, and we'll go over the configuration file. But essentially this setup command is, if this project has never run before, run this. So we're going to echo php server IP address, and we're going to pump that out to index.php. Okay, so let's try that out. So this is our new Yoda file, and as you can see here, we've got our new echo, and we've changed it here. And what we can do is we can do a Yoda share, and I'm going to share this as Casey Merrill, and what is my IP. So Yoda confirms that it shared this file with everyone who's got my repository, which by default everyone does. If you have someone that you know that you would like access to their repository, and they've shared something, and they've set up and they've summoned the yoda.repo, you can do a yoda join yoda dot and then their hostname, so hostname.com. So now that I've showed you how to join a repository, let's go and make sure that my shared repository here. So if I do a yoda find what is my IP, you should now see a simple IP lookup tool. So in theory, I should be able to just remove my what is my IP folder, and just to show that there's no magic involved here, we'll go ahead and kill what is my IP, and we'll go ahead and remove what is my IP as well. So let's go ahead and summon it. So Yoda summon Casey Merrill, what is my IP? And now that it's there, what is my IP should have an index file, and it should be, oh, yeah, well, it's missing the server environment variable. So what we can do here is, and this will actually segue nicely into our fix. So if we do vim our Yoda file, we can go in here and change this, so that way it's escaped. So right now, the old Yoda file is actually still in the repository here, and because we've made a change, what we can do is we can now reshare it again. Yoda share Casey Merrill. What is my IP? This should fail, and the reason why this should fail is because you've already shared this. So if you do it again and use -- force, it'll overwrite the old one. So again, we can remove what is my IP, and we can summon it again. And again, it'll check out Automagicproxy, remove containers, add containers, run containers, and you can see here what is my IP address is now running again. And let's just go see if this actually worked here. And it did. So in theory, we should be able to curl whatismyip.com, sorry, .keysmerrill.com, and see we get our IP address. So you can now summon because by default yoda.caseymerrill.com is in your list of repositories. If you wanted this whatismyip.caseymerrill.com service, you could just simply summon it as well. So I think that about covers repositories. If not, I'll make an episode later, but that should cover the ins and outs of repositories and sharing and collaborating with Yoda. Thanks, and stay tuned for more episodes.